my name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in the UK. Thanks for joining me today. This is my Monday Mashup session. This week we are using a brand new stamp set called Pretty Perennials. It really is really pretty. You can make some really beautiful flowers with this, and it does come with a set of dies as well, which are really beautiful, which add that extra dimension. But I'm just using the stamps today. And I'm going to be using several of them. I'm using 1, 2, 3 of the flowers here, the flower centre, the happy, and the birthday. And I've got another card to show you which uses the You Make Me as well. So this is one we're using. As I say, it's brand new. So this releases on the 5th of January 2021. So not long to wait now, so hopefully you're going to like it. So here is my card. It's slightly different today. We're actually colouring onto a black background. Now you can do this into any kind of dark background, and there's various techniques for it. The one we're using today is we're actually going to be using our frost white paint, just to add that extra sort of depth to the actual leaves and petals themselves. So hopefully you'll like that, and I will show you another alternative to it at the end, so you can see sort of the differences and how they look. So let's get going. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is to stamp our flowers, and I'm going to be using our Whisper White craft ink here. Now this is the ink that is a little bit chalky, so it has a sort of a chalky little effect on it, but it's lovely to work with. It's just a bit different to our normal inks. So I'm just going to pick it up first and stamp onto my background. So I'm going to do 2 of these large flowers, okay, and then I'm going to do several of the small ones. So I'm going to scatter these around a little bit. So you can do as many or as few as you want to. I'm just going to do a little bit off the edge here and here. And then I think one just off the edge that side. So we've got a sort of a little mixture of those. And then finally we've got this one with the 5 little dots in it. So I'm just going to stamp those as well. And I'm using these, I'm using these as little gap fillers really. So they're just filling in little gaps so that I can then just add a little bit more colour really. I don't want too many of them, just enough just to fill those gaps and just to sort of bring it all together. Just going to do one more just up there. Okay, so that's your flowers actually stamped. Now what I want to do, you'll notice as chalk ink dries, it kind of dries a little bit lighter, so the vibrancy of that whiteness will actually disappear a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to actually sort of enhance that a little bit more. So what I'm going to be using is our frost white ink. Now you've seen me use this a lot over the Christmas period when we were making sort of snowy backgrounds, frosty backgrounds, things like that. But it's also really good for sort of paint effects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a few drops. I don't want too much. I'm going to just putting this onto a block to act as my palette here. We can clean all this up later. Okay, so I just added a couple of drops to start with. We can always add to it. I've just got a normal paintbrush. This is quite a fine paintbrush that I'm using here. And I'm just going to mix this with 2 or 3 little drops of water. I don't want too much. I just want to be able to make it just a little bit thinner. It's really, you know, it's only just a tiny bit. I just want that, because when you poured it out it was quite sort of gloopy, so this is just to make it just that little bit more fluid really. Oops. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up some of the ink, and what I want to do is to paint my petals of my flowers. So you'll see it'll go down, and it's really pretty. It's really sort of sparkly, and this is just giving me a whiter background. It's also given me this lovely sort of sparkly background, so it's just makes it extra indulgent, really. If you find that your brush is a little bit dry, then don't be afraid to add a little bit more water. That's absolutely fine, but you just don't want to add too much. You want it to be sort of free flowing but not actually wet. I don't want my paper getting too wet. And you will find with this that you'll get little lines in it, but don't worry because we're going to colour over that. I'm just going into these dots as well. And I don't know how well that shows on the camera, but hopefully you can see it's quite a lot whiter than what the actual craft ink is. So again, I've just wet my brush there just to pick up a bit of colour because I know that I'm going over a bigger area here. So as I say, this will give a lovely sparkle to it, or even after we add the colour, you'll see that it'll all sparkle really, really nicely together. Again, if your brush is dry, just damp it so that it actually flows nicely. This is lovely, this paint, for doing this sort of technique. Okay, so I'm not sure how well this shows up on the camera, but from where I can see it, it is actually it's really shiny, so it's got that really beautiful sheen to it. I'm aware it probably doesn't show up in the camera that way, but hopefully you'll be able to see sort of where the actual colours are. Now, it is really important that you allow this to dry before you move on to the next stage. So the ones that I did right at the beginning will now be dry. They'll be absolutely fine. You can see, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but I can see that this is still quite wet where I've just been. So provided you start at where you sort of finished, where you started actually doing the painting, then you'll be absolutely fine. I'm going to keep this because I might not need it to actually do some touching up afterwards, but I'm going to pop it to one side so it's just out of my way. Now what I'm actually using is our watercolour pencils. So I haven't had these out for a while, I must be honest. They're really beautiful, I love them, but it's just something I don't really very often think about using. Yeah, I love colouring with pencils because they're so versatile in what you can do with them. So I'm going to be using, for some of my little flowers, I'm going to be using Daffodil Delight, Pumpkin Pie, and also possibly a touch of Whisper White, depending on how well it actually blends together. So I'm going to start off with my light colour, which is my daffodil, and using sort of light flicking motions, I'm going to add some colour on top of where I have just painted. Now you might find that it's a little bit resistant to do so at the moment if it's still a little bit damp, but if you just persevere, the colour will lay down on it. Remember, this is quite a light colour. So I'm just laying down some colour there. I'm hoping with the orange you might be able to see it a little bit better. I don't know how well you can see that. You see how the colours collected onto it. I'm going to zoom the camera down so hopefully you can see a little bit better. Okay, so this is where I started. Now I'm just going to add some more of the yellow. As I say, this is very light and you're going on top of this sort of pearlized effect, remember, so it's going to be a little bit resistant to start with, but hopefully once, as I say, the darker colours go on top, it starts to then sort of pop through a bit more. Okay, now I'm going to be using the white, and the reason I'm using the white is just to blend the two lots together, really. So I'm just pulling it in from that outside edge to hopefully then blend all the colours together. So I'm just continuing with the Daffodil Delight here. So I'm not sure that you can really see that very well. And then I'm adding some pumpkin pie just on top. If you find that the colour's not laying down at all well, it might just be that the end of your crayon has picked up some of the actual paint on it, and then it won't come off. So if that happens, what you need to do is to get yourself a piece of scrap card of some description and then just give it a quick scribble and it'll just take that off. But hopefully you can see that's now all bringing that all nicely together. So again, I'm just going to add some white just to blend those two colours in with the base. Okay, so that's very subtle. Now we're going to go into these sections here, which hopefully are going to be a little bit more vibrant. So we're going to be using Melon Mambo as our base colour. I then also used a little piece of the rich raspberry and also some cherry cobbler. So it's sort of a mixture of the three, really. So I'm going to do exactly the same as I've done with this one here, but I'm laying down first of all our Melon Mambo. Now you'll notice I tend to use a flicking motion and I go all in one direction. I just find that gives you a better coverage rather than like colouring like you would sort of as a child. So I find I can be more precise with it, but it's also quite quick. You can just add to that. So I'm just adding a little bit of rich raspberry. So this is from the centre point, and I'm just going up, just not quite as far as I did with the Melon Mambo. And then a little bit of cherry cobbler. Now this is just enough just to, it's quite subtle, but it gives it that nice sort of effect. And then I'm just going to bring my white in again. So remember, this is all over the top of your frost white paint, so you still get that lovely sparkle coming through. Okay, so hopefully you can see how that's starting to come together and how the light catches it. It just looks a bit different in different directions. So I'm going to continue with this. These are obviously the Daffodil Delight and Pumpkin Pie. I'm also going to do some in some sort of light blue colours. So we've got a Bermuda Bay and Pacific Point. So this is exactly the same technique, but I'm using Bermuda Bay first, just to lay down that base colour. Notice it's still all that flicking motion, so I'm not colouring like I would normally. I'm just flicking it out. Okay, and then a bit of Pacific point into the center. And again, just not too far up this time, but just enough just to make that center darker. And if you want to go in with a little bit more of the Bermuda Bay, you can. Oh, this will work with whatever colours you want, really. You just need to sort of have a play around with them. Okay, so now I'm going to just take the white like I did before and just try and bring them all in together just to make them sort of sing together, really. If you wanted to, you could add a little bit more of the white paint at this stage, but I find that sometimes that can be a little bit harsh. You just need to be a little bit careful. So can you see now that that's sort of blue? So I think, unfortunately, on the camera it doesn't show it to its sort of full beauty, really. It's a real shame, but hopefully the photographs will do. So that's the blue. The only other one I've done is these ones here, and for this I've used Gorgeous Grape. So this time I'm just going to be using sort of a round and a cross sort of motion. If you do just round, you get sort of a hole in the middle, so you just want to kind of mix it around a little bit. And then I've added a little bit of the Daffodil Delight into the centre. Again, I don't know how well that will show up. Depending on how the light catches it will depend on sort of how it shows. But hopefully you can see it's all sort of sparkly and pretty. So that's all of the colours that I've used. I'm going to continue until I've completed all my flowers, and then I'll come back and show you how we pop it into a card. Okay, so hopefully you can now see all the colour that's been laid down onto these flowers. I think the only one that's difficult really to see through the camera probably is the little purple ones. It is quite subtle, but it's more obvious in real life, if that makes sense. So you'll have to take my word for it if they just look like white circles to you. What I want to do now is to actually stamp the center of my flower. So these are the little centers, and I've chosen to use cherry cobbler for this because I wanted it to be able to stand out a little bit, but not, you know, not too much. And you'll find, because it's going down on this penciled and the frost white painted surface, you'll find it will come out a lot lighter than what you would normally expect for a cherry cobbler. So I'm just going to stamp that on top, and again, I don't know actually if you can see that properly. It is very, very subtle. I'm going to do the other one here. As I say, it is extremely subtle and only certain lights sort of catch it, really. In fact, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a second one, and I'm going to go with a black, because I don't think that once that's dry that's going to stand out quite enough for what we're looking for. So I'm going to go in with black, and I think that way, yes, that's better. So we get a much more prominent center. Okay, now just be very careful of this, because obviously the ink is wet, and because it's going on to this surface, it will take a little bit longer to dry than what it normally would. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Now it's entirely up to you how you want to actually put it together. Now I'm using a black on black card, but it's whether you want some kind of striking sort of split of colour. So if you want a little border of something. Now if you remember, Melon Mambo was our colour we started with, which is quite a vibrant pink, which I think would look stunning against this. So I'm going to go and grab some Melon Mambo. So you see it's quite a vibrant pink, and I just think that will really sort of make it pop, make it look really nice. So I'm going to cut a piece of that. Now the actual black, when we started. This was 1.5 centimetres smaller than our card base, so it was 13.35 centimetres tall along here, and then this way it was 9 centimetres. So this time I'm going to go 0.5 centimetre bigger, so I want 9.5 by 13.85 on my Melon Mambo layer. So 13.85 by 9.5. Okay, so if I pop that under there, I think you can see that really sort of lifts it. It just gives it that pop of colour underneath that sort of makes it really, really vibrant. So the next thing is to choose a greeting for our card. Now I absolutely love this happy. I'm going to zoom out again so that you can see me properly, otherwise you'll be not being able to see exactly what I'm showing you. So this is the pretty perennials that I was talking to you about. So this is the happy, and you've got a birthday, or you make me happy, sending lots of happy. There's lots of all sort of options. I want a simple happy birthday for this one. So because this is black, I either need to use something that's quite light, like a white, or I need to use a contrast, which I could use this pink one here. I could pick out one of the colours I've got in here if I wanted to make it even more vibrant. So it's entirely up to you, really. I'm going to keep it with the pink, I think, because I think the pink really makes it pop, and I think it makes it look really, really nice. So I'm going to take a piece of the Melon Mambo and my happy stamp, and my birthday as well. You can never read them when they're upside down. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually stamp these separately, because I think to try and do them together I might end up in a bit of a muddle. So I think it's going to be far easier for me to do them separately. So I'm thinking a sort of banner or something across here. So I'm going to stamp happy, and then I might do it at a slight angle, possibly. Let's try it. That's the best way to try these things. Now you could of course emboss this if you wanted to, so you could do it black with white embossing, for example. I'm choosing to use the other way round so that it actually stands out nicely on my card, but it's entirely up to you. Okay, so that's my happy. I'm actually going to stamp the birthday completely away from this, because I'm going to cut that out, I think. So I'm going to stamp this over out of the way. Just going to fill in that little gap there, and then I can trim that or die cut it or whatever I want to do with it in a moment. So the first thing I'm going to do is to actually cut out my happy. Now I'm going to do this with just a small border. So the trick is just to keep everything moving. Don't think about it too much and let your scissors do the work. So you're just opening and closing your scissors, and you're actually moving it with your other hand. As I say, just let the scissors flow so they'll follow the path. And trust me, the more you think about this, the worse it becomes. So it is better just to let it be quite quick about it. Don't, you know. And we're looking for an overall effect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a perfect border all the way around. You just want to make sure that it sort of follows the line of the actual stamped image. Because even if you buy die cut images, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but you won't get an even border all the way around, and we take no notice of it. So when you're doing it yourself, don't go too close, because if you go too close, that's when you sort of notice it all the more. And just give yourself plenty of sort of wiggle room, and don't worry about going too much into you know, deep into sort of big areas like this. I'm not going all the way down, I'm just literally just giving it a border. Just going to round that very edge off. Okay, so that's my happy. Now I've got my birthday here. Now, in hindsight, now looking at this, I'm thinking that the birthday might actually be quite nice on a little strip of Whisper White. So I'm just going to chop a little piece of Whisper White for myself. I've always got some scraps hanging around. I'm just going to trim it first, and then I'm going to stamp it, because this is going to be quite fiddly to actually try and cut afterwards. So I'm going to do it in black ink again. I'm grabbing my birthday, and I want to try and make it sort of in the middle of this. Now I'm going to take a chance it's actually fine. If that had been slightly out, I've still got a little bit here to play with, or I can turn it over. So you know, don't beat yourself up if it doesn't work first time. It really doesn't matter. And what I think might be quite nice is to try and sort of intertwine these a little bit between the actual towels of the word. Now obviously we don't want to lose its sort of what it means, but I think if we can position it somewhere where we can sort of intertwine, it would be quite nice. Can't really afford to lose my two ends of my P. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a V in the end of this one first. So I'm thinking that this, the two P's could go here. So they're not actually intertwined, but they're sort of sitting with it quite nicely. So I'm going to try and cut the same sort of border this end. Okay, so if we can imagine this on here. So my two P's I'm going to have here. And I'm going to sort of intertwine it, so I quite like that, sort of like that. So you can still, it still says happy. Maybe that sort of position there. And I don't mind if this hangs off the side of my card here, that's absolutely fine as well. So I'm just going to play around with putting it this side as well. Yeah, I actually quite like that as well. So it's entirely up to you. You can have a play around and see where you want to position anything you want to, really. It's only ever a guide. So yeah, this is our sort of thought process that we go through before we actually put them together. Now, I always say, don't stick anything down until you're absolutely happy where it is, because you can always cut another piece of card. You can always do something else. So don't ever feel that you have to sort of copy everything. I mean, some might like it sort of with happy on a slant. A lot of people struggle if it's not symmetrical, so they might feel that they need it to go in the center, in which case you could just raise this up slightly. I actually quite like that myself, so maybe that's the way we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually stick this one flat. Okay, so I'm just using a little bit of Tombow for this. Don't need a huge amount, just make sure each piece has got a little bit on it. And I like to use tweezers just to pick things up and position them. So I'm going to pop this so that I've got a roughly equal distance either end here. Make sure that's stuck down nicely. Now my birthday, I think I'm going to stick across here. Maybe, I think I need to go into dimensionals on this one. So I'm actually using the edge of my dimensionals here. And again, I'm just going to use tweezers, just for I find it personally easier just to line it up. So I'm going to just raise this slightly so I can see where I'm going. There we go. And I want to add some little gems just to the centres of my small flowers. I'm not going to add them on to the larger ones because I think there's enough going on with those. So I'm just going to take the smallest ones and just pop it onto those three that I can see the centre. I can't see the centres of these ones, so I'm not going to try and add any more. Okay, so now I need to decide whether I want to raise this any further, and I think yes I do. So what I'm going to do is glue this first layer flat. Okay, just going to make sure that that's all stuck down really nicely. Okay, and then I'm actually going to use 3D foam or dimensionals just to raise this layer. I think it'll look really nice with it layered. It's not too heavy, this card, so I don't need to absolutely smother the back, but it's just nice to have support sort of at all corners and in the middle, just to stop it getting squashed really. And again, I'm just going to hold this up. Let's say if you wanted to, you could do this on a different colour card entirely. You don't have to do black. I will show you a version that I started onto Pretty Peacock in a moment, which is done very slightly differently, but you'll be able to see sort of the difference of using the or not using the frost paint. So that's our completed card. So it's just another technique where we can use our frost white paint and also our chalk white paint. It's nice to sometimes add colour to sort of those dark backgrounds and to make them sort of really sort of pop out. So I hope you like that today. If it's not your sort of colour scheme, then obviously you could change that to be whatever you wanted it to be. I just want to show you one that I made earlier using a very similar technique. So this is using Pretty Peacock, so it's one of my favourite colours. I absolutely adore Pretty Peacock. And what I've done is I've done the same technique, but I didn't paint the leaves actually with the frost white first. I literally went straight onto the chalk white. I then added a little bit of the frost white on top just to make it sort of pop, and I added a few splatters of the frost white in the background as well. So it's sort of different techniques, but it's on a similar sort of vein, so you can kind of see how they can look very differently. And I did just sponge the edge of this in Pretty Peacock, so it was the same colour on colour, just to add a little bit of depth to it rather than put a border on it. But as I say, they're similar techniques, they're just very, very marginally different. So I hope you like those, and I hope you'll give it a go, and I will see you next week for another Monday mashup. Take care, bye.